Okay, so we are starting to talk about the practices of a monopoly and the effect of taxes that exist in any market where the government, let's say, impose taxes. So if the government impose taxes, as you are going to see here in this graph, you will start by seeing that we have here the marginal cost, which is in the red line. And this is due to the fixed cost that we are going to have. And then if I have an extra tax, this is will reflect on another curve, which is a parallel shift to the old one, and then with the amount of cost that we're going to have. So this is the impact of the marginal cost. Let's say, for example, in cigarettes, when the government impose taxes, so what's going to happen? So the cost is going to increase. How this will reflect on the marginal revenue? This consequently, as you know the rule, the marginal revenue will exactly be equal to the marginal cost plus the taxes that we all have it, as you see here. So if we have an impact of tax, so we are just adding the lump sum, and this is T, it's representing in the terms of lump sum. What do you mean by lump sum? A constant amount of money that is going to be imposed on whatsoever the cost that we're going to have. So this is the impact of taxes. When the government see that we have any company is monopolizing, so they impose more taxes. Let's say, for example, it is a luxury products in order to set a higher price. So as we did, the marginal cost is increasing with the amount of tax. We're going to see as well that we have here a marginal revenue, and this is marginal revenue which is equal to the demand. And if we go here for the demand, which is represented the average revenue, so you will see that we will have two curves. So the first curve will represent the marginal cost with the marginal revenue, and this is the original quantity. If I add taxes, then there will be another curve, and this is will reflect on if I'm using marginal cost plus the taxes, then I will have a higher prices. But if we go for this one, and I will be looking for the willings and the ability of people to buy. So if it is a monopoly, so I'm going to the higher prices. Why we are using taxes? Because the government usually interfere in any monopoly practices by different things. As we are going to see, they are just using regulation by setting the price, or they are using taxes, or they are using the antitrust policy, as we're going to see what will be the practices that the government do in order to hinder any monopoly practice. So this is the role of the government when we have an efficient market. So the government try to control these practices. Okay. So after we did the impact of tax, as we see the regulatory body rule here, it is very clear that this is will reflect on having a higher price. When we have a higher price, so I'm targeting different segmentations in the market. And this is reflect on less quantity and higher price. So this impact of a change of prices will be higher than the impact of a change of taxes. Let's say, for example, if the taxes is 10%, then the change in the prices, maybe it is higher because I'm not going to look for the equilibrium point. I'm looking for the willingness and ability of the people to buy. Similarly to, and this is reflect to the importance of the product itself. If the product is mandatory, let's say, so certain consumer will not respond to the increase of taxes and they're going to buy. And this is depend on the product. If I have an elastic product and have a substitute, this is will have another close substitute, so I can get rid of it. So this product can be dropped. So if we go for the monopoly, the multiple plant firms, what do you mean by multiple plant firms? A firm has two plants, has two factories. What should be the output? So usually we said in the previous video or previous lecture that we are need to control or determine the quantity of monopoly. How much monopoly is going to determine his units. But if I have multiple plants, so let's say if we go for Tesla, let's say, for example, and when they produce the electric vehicle, they have multiple plants across the globe. What will be the output that we're going to have? If this is going to affect the output or not, for sure it will going to affect the output, and it was highly related to the cost. So the well-known formula, the very well-known formula why monopoly exists. Monopoly exists if it is private sector, it is looking for profit. So if I have a company and it is controlling a business, let's say in one country, so this buy, it represents the profit. So the profit is consist of the revenue that exists from the wholesaling units minus the cost of the first C1, which is the first function of the cost. Let's say I have two plants, one in Bangladesh and the other one in China or in India. So this is the cost of the first plant. It's completely different than the cost of the second plant. Assuming that we're selling the prices the same. So if we are taking all the products and selling through one channel and I have a single price, you remember, we said I can set one price or I can set discriminating prices, different prices according to the willingness. So here for simplicity, I'm using just to the price as you see here. So the point of equilibrium, we said that marginal revenue must be equal to the marginal cost, and we said it will be equal to the. So this is the change of the profit with respect to the quantity. With respect to the quantity means the differentiation or the impact of the extra unit. As you know, that we have a very well-known formula, and this formula represents that marginal revenue in a perfect competitive market equal marginal cost. So this is the point of optimization, marginal revenue equal marginal cost. But if we are here, optimization point, but if we are comparing it to the monopoly, you will see that the pricing in the monopoly would be higher than the marginal revenue. And this is common sense because I have the capacity to look for the willingness and the ability of the people to buy a certain product. So this will be our task mathematically in order to determine how we can determine the quantity of a monopoly and the prices, and this is our concern. So as we said, if I have multiple planet, different planet, and I care about this approach, multiple planet, because you see, let's say, for example, Mahindra is looking to have different planets in different country, automotive industry having different planet across different countries, Levi's, all these companies, despite they are not monopoly, but they are having multiple, just an example of what the meaning of multiple planet. Why we are having multiple planets? For sure, we are trying to have minimization of cost, and this minimization of cost will affect my revenue. So this is the core point that we are looking for. So this is marginal revenue equal marginal cost 1 equal marginal cost 2, and so on. So if we're going to sketch, and I'm not concerning about practicing that much of sketching, but I'm just explaining the importance of the curves. So we have here marginal cost 1. If we go back a little bit, I will try to do it once by one. So let's say, for example, here, I will start by a firm, and then just for an explanation, this is the total cost. So the total cost, MCT, the total cost consists of marginal cost 1 and marginal cost 2. So if I have here the marginal revenue, so this is the quantity for the first firm, and then the quantity for the second firm. Let's say, for example, it is 10, and this is another 10. The total summation, if I have here 10 units, and here I'm going to add extra 10, so the total will be my 20, okay? So the intersection between marginal revenue and marginal cost total represent the quantity total. And if I'm looking for the demand, this product demand, let's say, for example, then I will determine the prices according to this intersection. If I have problems, and usually I ask for such a practice, and usually I concern about such a practice, if I have a function, this is the function 1, cost function, it is 110 Q1, and the other factory, as you see here, quantity 2, 20 Q2, okay? So you see here, there is a differences. There is a differences of, if you look here, 10 Q1 and 20 Q2, this is represent the 10 represent the variable cost. So we have different variable costs because in any linear equation, any function, let's say I will remind you with the function. If we have here, for example, total cost equal fixed cost plus variable cost. So the TC here will be what? Will be, let's say, constant, but I don't have constant here. It will be 0 plus 10Q1 for the first one. So the 10Q, which is represent the variable cost per unit. And the second function is 20Q2. So we have two curves and we have a demand function. What is the demand function? Price equals 700 minus 5Q. And this is the linear equation that we mentioned. What do you mean by linear equation? Any linear equation equal mx plus b. So what is the equation here? I have here the P, I have here the P, and we have here the constant will be 700 and minus 5Q. As you know, that the demand equation is negative relation, and this is exists in the negative relation. I can put it in other way. I can put it in the terms of quantity, in the terms of inverse demand. So if I want to transfer it to, I can write it 5Q here equal 5Q equal 700 minus 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 P. And then I can find Q, how much the Q will be. Then the Q will be 5. I divide all the whole parts by 5. Then the quantity will be equal 700 over 5 minus, as you see, 1 over 5, 1 over 5p. So this is the equation. If it is in the terms of mean, it is in the terms of quantity. Clear? So if I want to determine on a diagram, draw the marginal cost for the two factories and the average marginal revenue curves and the marginal cost here, I have equations and I can substitute with variables and I have the final answers. And then we can determine, indicate the profit maximization condition. So just this is the given requirement on the diagram, marginal cost and the average marginal revenue curves and the total marginal cost here. Remember that the total marginal cost will consist of the summation of the two planets that we have. And then we're going to compare the two planets with the marginal revenue. Okay. Let's go for the learner index. The learner index means this is one of the most important things, which is measuring the monopoly power. How we can measure the monopoly power. How we can measure what we call it concentration ratio. So what is learner index? Learner index measures the power of the monopoly calculated as the excess of price over marginal cost. So let's say, for example, what is the learner index? It is the price minus marginal cost over the P. What is this index? Calculate the monopoly power. I have a monopoly power by 30%, 40%, 50%. So I will just, let's say, for example, the example of an iPod, and this iPod they were selling it, let's say, for example, in old days, they were selling it with $120, and the marginal cost per unit it is 20 and over the 120. So if we are going to substitute here, you will have 100 divided 120, and this index will give me 100 over divided by 120. It will represent 83% times 100 times 100. This is represent 83.3% concentration ratio. So they have a huge power because they have a technology, they have innovation, and this is what we call it learning index. So if I want to have a simple product in a very competitive market and I have a lot of competition and we go for another practice, let's say, and I have a price, let's say, for example, the price is 10 and the cost is 9 with respect to the price, which is 10. So 1 over 10, it will be 10%. You imagine? So 10% means this is the concentration issue. I have only 10% power. I don't have that much of power. And this will be based on the elasticity as well. So I can find the concentration ratio or the monopoly power or the huge impact. It depends on the elasticity of the product, and it depends on the learner index or the monopoly power. So the rule of thumb for pricing, طبعا, we have just explained before the markup. If you remember, the markup is price minus the marginal cost over the price, and this is the markup, is equal to the inverse of the elasticity, and this is the power that we have, the rule of thumb for pricing. So this is the same way. If you look here, we have a marginal revenue intersect with the marginal cost. Marginal revenue intersect with the marginal cost. I think here price minus marginal cost over price, it will give me the same formula of the markup. The concentration ratio, it giving me the same ratio of the concentration ratio is the same of the markup. It means both of them are identical. They are giving me the markup, the power, the power related to the concentration ratio. So marginal revenue intersect with the marginal cost. This is will give the quantity, and then we go for the demand power where we are having a single price. If the rule of thumb here, you will see that if I have more the differences between the two curves, that this one is flat and this one is more steeper. This is elastic product and this is inelastic product. So in the inelastic product, in the necessary product, you will find that the markup will be higher and higher and higher. But in the elastic product, you will see that that graph is flattened. We have, I can replace it, I can sacrifice for it. So it will be highly flattened and with a higher slope. So this is the rule of thumb of pricing. So the markup and the concentration ratio are the same. So one of the very interesting pricing of the DVD, and it is very interesting because we know that before 2001, before Blockbuster got out of the market and Netflix override it, so they were depending on rental DVD. And thanks for the technology, when the technology interfered, what the technology did, the technology can make, I can make a rent online, and then as well, I can make a streaming recently using Netflix technology and the algorithm and the practices that they use. So as you see here that we have before, you are not here, طبعا, VHS with DVD, with hard DVD, I have to bring a huge device كده for using the high definitions of the DVD. So as you see here, high definition DVD were introduced in 2006, and they expected to displace the conventional DVD that we use. The power of technology, and this is what I meant, thanks for the technology, because the technology gives us the power to use a better approach. And this is, we can relate it to Schumpeter, or we can relate it to something called creative destruction. Creative destruction, that the new technology destroy the old products. And I cannot forget that in 2002, when Netflix entered the market, the Blockbuster, one of the top businesses in USA, has bankrupt and get out of the market because they were not able to change and to make a dynamic change in order to maintain the markets. And this is reflect on the getting out of the business. When one of the business get out of the market and I have a new business with new technology, then we have what we call it market power. So, and the other Blockbuster, when it's got out of the market, they call the market failure. I failed, I cannot maintain, I fail, I cannot make any dynamic or any changes, okay? So three factors determine a firm elasticity, and this is important, you can write a note for it, that the elasticity of the market, the whole of the elasticity of the market, the whole of the industry, and this product is elastic or inelastic. For Siemens, for example, in Egypt, when we calculate the cement in Egypt, before 2010, it was inelastic, but with the increase of numbers of firms in the market, what happened? The market become elastic and the prices are increasing and we have oversupply. The number of the firm, as just mentioned, so I relate both of them. So elasticity and the number of firms affect the value itself, it affected the markup. So the more we have more firms, the more that we have more production, the more we can have substitute. And the interaction among firms. The interaction among firms, because if you know that we have an OPEC union, they cartel together and they act as monopoly. So this is the meaning interaction. So my profit is not depending on my production, but it is also depending on the other production. So this is the meaning that I was trying to explain. So the OPEC, they are a cartel and they are a union of different firms, and this is give us the power to produce in the market. Because the demand of such commodity, let's say, for example, is mandatory, it is important. No one cannot imagine, and no one will say that we are going to stop using fossil fuel. We are going to maintain fossil fuel, especially after yesterday car crash for Tesla. So yesterday there were a car crash for Tesla, and it was auto drive, and the people in the car dead. So this is make the company lost $5 billion yesterday from just an accident. So we are going to make a trust once more for the fossil fuels until we develop more technology. So don't say that we're going to stop for the fossil fuel. Why I'm saying this? Because as you see here, it is the OPEC, it is the oil production, it is mandatory. And when we need technology, we need more fossil fuels in order to produce more and more, because we need high temperature in producing the components of the technology. Okay, and then it is completely different than coffee and cocoa and copper and all these elastic products, because we have a lot of substitute and they don't have monopoly power. Okay, so the number of firms, only a few firms account for the sales. So when we have unionism in any industry, will create a monopoly power, and this is create barrier to enter the market. So if I am not in the OPEC, it will be a barrier to produce alone or set the prices, because they agree on the price and the unit. What do you mean by interaction among firms? This is what will lead us to the oligopoly, when firms agree together and they make a cartel and they act as a monopoly. And this is very beneficial for them, because as we said before, that when we move from a union to a monopoly, I can produce less and set price higher. So if there is an aggressive competition and there is no trust between people, there is no trust, so they are going to have a price war. And when we have a price war, the consumers will gain. But if there is a cartel across of them, this is what we have. If they collude together, they agree together, they merge together, or they make a single company, this will affect the antitrust law. So what is the role of antitrust law? The role of the antitrust law to penalize, as the antitrust law penalized Microsoft because they were using their software and hardware and their operating systems, and they were controlling many devices, controlling many practices, and the US sued them and they penalized them because they are having a monopoly power, and it ended up by paying a huge amount of money as a penalty. Because raising prices in concert rather than individual is more likely to be profitable, collusion can generate substantial monopoly power. So if I have union, as in sports, so the unions maybe will affect the decisions of the decision makers or decisions of the pricing. So here, deadweight loss, as we explained it before, what is the deadweight loss? It is the social and due to the inefficiency in the market. What are the efficient market? The efficient market is the perfect competition, but if we are having a monopoly, we will have a deadweight loss. So what will be the losses here? What will be my losses in the market? So I will try to highlight it to give you time to think where will be the loss. So as we explained before, this is the point of intersection of the marginal revenue with the marginal cost to give me the quantity of monopoly. And here I determine the monopoly price. And this is the inefficient market. But if I have a competitive market, and when we have a competitive market here, we will have the intersection of the marginal cost with the average revenue that we have it with the demand. And this is what represented the other market. But if the market move from perfect competition to monopoly by merging, by cartel, by colluding, so the quantity will be less and the prices will be high. So, and the prices will be high. The quantity will be less and the prices will be higher. And I think this is a shaded area will be my deadweight loss. What is the deadweight loss? It is the social inefficiency that exists in the market because they have one firm is controlling the practices and the prices are coming very high. So here the government have to interfere. So this is the meaning of deadweight loss. So this is the profit, and then area here, this is will be, let's say, okay. So this is the deadweight loss. This is the area. This is the triangle B and C. It is the deadweight loss that we have it from the higher prices that we can have it, and as well the quantity that we are going to impose. So what will be my consumer surplus? My consumer surplus, it is the area above the demand, above the price of the monopoly. This is the consumer surplus. So if we are going, this is triangular, rectangle A, this is represent the loss on the consumer surplus. Why losses? Because he can have lower prices if the market was not monopoly and we have a cheaper prices, and this is represent the loss. We have the area here, A and B is the loss. Why it is a loss? Because I lost not only the price, but I lost also the quantity that I can have it from the differences of the quantity here and that one. If we go for the producer surplus, what will be the producer surplus? The producer surplus is the area above the monopoly. And what will be the producer gain? It is the whole A minus the C, which is the dropping of the quantity. And we can calculate. So if I'm asking you, how we can calculate the producer surplus? So this would be the rectangular. And if I want to find the dead weight loss, it will be half the base times the height. Here, for example, if I have the difference of quantity, مثلا 10, and the price is 20, so half the base times the height, which would be the rectangle that we have it here. Let's go for the practices, something called rent-seeking, okay? What is the meaning of rent-seeking? Spending money in social unproductive effort to acquire and maintain exercise of monopoly. I want to maintain the only producer. I want to maintain the high profit. So rent-seeking, يعني spending more money in social unproductive efforts. What do you mean by unproductive? يعني I'm not developing, I'm not changing the product, but just I want to exercise monopoly. I pay money in order to control. And in 1996, we have done it. Midland Company successfully lobbied the Clinton administration and requiring ethanol. What do you mean by ethanol? Ethanol, it is one of the most important products where they can create fossil fuel or more vehicle fuel to be produced. So we want to monopolize getting the ethanol from the corn. So the corn that USA is #1 in producing it, they have to make a trade-off, either to use it for food or to use the corn to produce ethanol, because the return of producing ethanol will be more than the return of selling the corn in its natural process or natural features to return less amount. So had this ADM company had a monopoly on using the corn to produce ethanol, and this is what we call it rent-seeking. I support Clinton administration regulation in order to maintain the power. So this is what we call it rent-seeking. I spend money, I help the decision maker to give me the power to maintain using or supplying the market for a single product. So this is called rent-seeking, and this exists exclusively. So let's say, for example, Malik exclusively will produce for the whole market. So this is the meaning of rent-seeking, spending more money. So what we can do here, by setting price regulation. What do you mean by regulating the prices? The government interfere by dropping the price of the monopoly by a little bit. So in Egypt, let's say, for example, in the cement industry, especially before 2010, the government regulate the prices. They set the prices. And instead of selling the ton by 800 Egyptian pound, they said, if your market, let's say, for example, that the cost is 200 and the price in the market is 800, so the government interfere and decrease the prices from 800 to 600. So this is what we call it regulating the prices. The government interfere by decreasing the prices in the way to increase the number of units in the market. So this is the practices. So we said before that the government can use the antitrust law to decrease the monopoly power. Number 2, we said the price regulation, the second criteria, where we can decrease the prices a little bit for increasing the number of units on the market and make it available for everyone. So the new marginal revenue will be at the Q1. Will be my new marginal revenue. This is the prices, which is interact here with the quantity. Here I have intersection between the marginal cost. This is the new marginal cost, and I will move across the demand at a lower level of price. So this is price regulation. One of the very well-known practices as well for the monopoly, in addition to this, that's something called natural monopoly. Firm that can produce to the entire output of the market. Let's say fixed line in the Egyptian market. So this is called natural monopoly. So when I produce to the whole market, would be brilliant. Why? Because the cost will decrease with the high amount of number of outputs, so I can reach economies of scale, or I can reach an efficient level in the market in the short terms and economies of scale in the long term. So in the natural monopoly, if I am the only company who have the resources and I can produce for the whole market, I can do what? I can make a regulating the prices. So if we go back for this graph, regulating the prices of a natural monopoly, a firm is a naturally being monopoly because it has economies of scale. What do you mean by economies of scale? Economies of scale with the increase of the number of production through time, the average total cost is going to decrease. When the average total cost decreases, this means that I have an economies of scale, and this is the success story for China when they can expand the quantity and decrease the average total cost. So because it has an economies of scale due to the average cost and the marginal cost over the entire output. So if we go for the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, this is the point of intersection, and then we go for the pricing, and this is the higher price. So this is the average cost that we have it with the decreasing. With the shifts, we have another shifts because the economies of scale depend on the shifts. What do you mean by shifts? I move across time and I have more quantity in order to more quantity at lower cost, more quantity at a lower cost. So this is the practice of a natural monopoly when one firm, no one firm can produce to the whole market unless they have technology recently because the government interfered recently and regulate the products. Rate of return of the regulation. So when we have a maximum price of the regulatory, so this is need difficulty of agreeing on the number of firms to set regulatory lag. What do you mean? The net result in the uh, decreasing the price. What is the meaning of lag? Yani the effect will impact after how many numbers of year? Will lag 1 year, lag 2 years, lag 3 years, whatsoever. So the difficulty of agreeing on what will be the return, why we are setting the prices of cement from 800 to 600. What will be the impact? If this is good or bad? Do the firms going to diminish, or that this will decrease the sales, or this is will affect the government indirectly through the taxes that they are paying? So what will be the net results from this regulator? So let's recap what we said. We said that we are having oligopoly or monopsony. Oligopoly, market with only a few buyers. Monopsony, buyer ability to affect the price of a market. So we said monopoly. Monopoly is a supplier. Monopsony, it is the buyer. It is the same wording for the oligopoly when we have only few buyers. So this is an introduction for the oligopoly market that we're going to do it in the next time. Marginal value, what do you mean the marginal value? This is the most important things, marginal value. And in business model, they call it value proposition. What is your value added? We name it in economics value added. What is your value added? What is the incremental? So here, what is the marginal value? What is the extra value that I'm going to have? Value proposition. This is called one of the core of the business. Let's say, for example, what is the value proposition of Netflix? Let's say the value proposition of Netflix, it provides us before with the freemium products, and then we will go for the marginal expenditure. So this is the marginal cost. Average prices added per units of the goods. So let's say for example here, if we have a competitive market. In the competitive market, we are having demand, and normally this is the regulated prices, and this is the regulated prices, and this is the demand. So this is what we call it market value. What I'm going to have, what is the value that I'm looking for? If we go for the marginal cost, so in the other graph, in the competitive, the first one, it is the competitive buyer, and this is the competitive seller. When we compare both of them, this is the supply curve, and this is the demand curve, and this is in the perfect competitive market, it is constant price. So monopsony, what do you mean by monopsony? Which means I'm the only buyers. So I will look for the market value add. And we said that the monopsony exists in, let's say, for aircraft or automotive industry, where we have big company and they are buying for a single company. This is called the monopsony. And I am Mercedes, let's say, I'm buying from Fatma company for producing small motors and so on. So this is the market. Market the aggregate average expenditure, I have it here, and the marginal expenditure. The meaning the marginal, the incremental, the extra units that I'm going to have. So marginal expenditure and the average expenditure affect the pricing. If I have more value added, I will set the prices at higher level. If I have less value added, I will set the prices at a lower level. So as you see here, I can set the prices lower than the competitive market. So to recap, monopsony and the monopoly, comparing them, both of them, then we will have the demand and the supply for the cost functions that we have. So the monopsony and monopoly compared together, then we have different types of market. These diagrams show the similarity between the monopoly and the monopsony that exist. So they are almost clear existing similarity between both of them. The monopoly produce marginal revenue intersect with marginal cost, and the monopoly purchase upon the point where the marginal expenditure intersect with the marginal value. So we practice the monopoly, we said the monopoly, we said the regulatory body, we said the antitrust law, natural monopoly, and thank you for listening.